The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most protracted and emotionally charged conflicts in the world. It is a conflict marked by violence, displacement, and a profound sense of loss on both sides. Our journey takes us to a land of ancient history and deep religious significance. Our story begins thousands of years ago in the region known today as Israel and Palestine. This land has been a crossroads of civilizations, a place where empires rose and fell, and where diverse cultures and religions intertwined. For Jews, this land is the biblical land of Israel, the place where their ancestors formed a covenant with God and where their prophets walked the earth. For Palestinians, this land is their ancestral homeland, where they have lived for centuries, cultivating the land and building their communities. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE was a cataclysmic event for the Jewish people. Despite their displacement, Jews carried with them the memory of their homeland and the hope of one day returning. The longing for Zion, the dream of returning to their homeland, remained a powerful force in Jewish consciousness. While Jews were scattered across the globe, the land of their forefathers witnessed the rise of a new faith, Islam. Within a few decades, Muslim armies, driven by religious zeal and a desire to spread their faith, conquered vast territories, including the Levant. Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, fell to the Muslim Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab in 638 CE. For centuries, Jewish communities in Europe and elsewhere faced recurring waves of persecution and discrimination. Expulsions from various countries forced Jewish communities to uproot themselves and seek refuge elsewhere, adding to their sense of displacement and vulnerability. These conditions, combined with the lingering effects of past persecution, created a fertile ground for the emergence of Zionism, a political movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. The late 19th century witnessed the birth of Zionism, a movement driven by the desire to create a Jewish state in Palestine. Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist living in Vienna, is considered the father of modern political Zionism. Herzl argued that Jews would never be fully accepted or secure in Europe and that they needed a homeland of their own where they could live free from persecution. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Ottoman Empire, once a formidable power, found itself in decline. World War I proved to be the death knell for the Ottoman Empire. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire had profound implications for the future of Palestine. In the midst of World War I, the British government issued a document that would have far-reaching consequences for the future of Palestine and the Middle East as a whole. The Balfour Declaration, named after British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, was a letter expressing the British government's support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. However, the declaration was fraught with ambiguity and contradictions. The Balfour Declaration, while a victory for the Zionist movement, set in motion a chain of events that would have tragic consequences for the Palestinian people. As Jewish immigration to Palestine increased in the years following World War I, tensions escalated, leading to outbreaks of violence. The Great Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939, a major uprising against British rule and Jewish immigration, shook the foundations of British authority in Palestine. As World War II raged across Europe, the situation in Palestine remained a powder keg. The horrors of the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime, strengthened the resolve of the Zionist movement to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. The plight of Jewish refugees fleeing Europe added urgency to their cause. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem under international control. The partition plan was accepted by the Jewish leadership but rejected by the Arab leadership, who viewed it as a betrayal and an injustice. The stage was set for a full-blown conflict. On May 15, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The surrounding Arab states, opposed to the partition plan and the creation of Israel, immediately invaded the newly declared state. The war that followed, known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War or the War of Independence in Israel, would have a profound and lasting impact on the region. For Palestinians, the war and its aftermath were a catastrophe, a Nakba in Arabic. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes during the war, becoming refugees in neighboring countries. Hundreds of Palestinian villages were depopulated and destroyed, erased from the map. The Nakba became a defining moment in Palestinian history, a symbol of their dispossession and their ongoing struggle for justice and return. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War was a decisive victory for Israel. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned by the invading Arab armies, Israel managed to defend its newly acquired territory and expand its borders beyond the areas allocated to it in the UN partition plan. The war ended in 1949 with the signing of armistice agreements between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The war had far-reaching consequences for the region. It led to the creation of Israel, but it also resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and the occupation of Palestinian territories. The war also sowed the seeds for future conflicts as the issues of Palestinian refugees, the status of Jerusalem, and the borders between Israel and its Arab neighbors remained unresolved. In the aftermath of the war, Israel consolidated its control over the territories it had captured, while the Palestinian refugees scattered across the region faced a precarious existence in overcrowded camps. The Arab states, reeling from their defeat, grappled with the political and social consequences of the war. The Palestinian issue became a rallying cry for Arab nationalism, fueling resentment and instability in the region. The 1948 war also marked the beginning of a new era in the Middle East. The Cold War, which pitted the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its allies, cast a long shadow over the region. Israel, aligned with the West, became a key strategic asset for the United States, while the Soviet Union sought to expand its influence among the Arab states. The Arab-Israeli conflict became increasingly intertwined with the global rivalry between the superpowers, further complicating efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The 1948 war had a profound and lasting impact on the Palestinian people. The Nakba, the Arabic word for catastrophe, became a defining moment in their history, a constant reminder of their dispossession and the loss of their homeland. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes and lands, becoming refugees in neighboring countries. They were scattered across the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, living in overcrowded camps and facing an uncertain future. The refugees clung to the hope of one day returning to their homes and reclaiming their lost lives. However, as years turned into decades, that hope dwindled, and a new generation grew up in exile, inheriting the legacy of displacement and the yearning for a homeland they had never known. The war also resulted in the occupation of Palestinian territories by Israel. The West Bank, captured from Jordan, and the Gaza Strip, captured from Egypt, became subject to Israeli military rule. The occupation brought about significant changes to the lives of Palestinians living in these territories. They faced restrictions on their movement, their economic activities, and their political rights. The Israeli military presence became a constant in their lives, with checkpoints, curfews, and military raids a common occurrence. The occupation created a system of inequality and discrimination, where Palestinians were denied the same rights and opportunities as Israeli citizens. The occupation also led to the confiscation of Palestinian land for the establishment of Israeli settlements, further fragmenting the Palestinian territories and exacerbating tensions. The displacement of Palestinians and the occupation of their territories created a humanitarian crisis that continues to this day. Palestinian refugees living in camps face dire conditions with limited access to basic services such as healthcare, education and sanitation. The occupation also had a devastating impact on the Palestinian economy, hindering development and trapping many Palestinians in a cycle of poverty. In the aftermath of the 1948 war, the Palestinian people found themselves scattered and dispossessed, their homeland lost and their future uncertain. However, they refused to be silenced or forgotten. The Palestinian national movement, which had emerged in the early decades of the 20th century, gained new momentum as Palestinians sought to reclaim their rights and achieve self-determination. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, founded in 1964, emerged as the main representative body of the Palestinian people. Led by Yasser Arafat, the PLO launched a struggle against Israel, combining political mobilization, international diplomacy, and armed struggle. The PLO's goals were to liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation and establish an independent Palestinian state. The Palestinian struggle for recognition and rights was met with resistance from Israel and its allies. Israel viewed the PLO as a terrorist organization and refused to negotiate with it. The international community was divided, with some countries supporting the Palestinian cause while others sided with Israel. The Cold War further complicated matters as the Arab-Israeli conflict became intertwined with the global rivalry between the superpowers. Despite the challenges they faced, Palestinians continued to resist the occupation and demand their rights. The First Intifada, which erupted in 1987, was a spontaneous uprising of Palestinians in the occupied territories against Israeli rule. The Intifada, characterized by mass protests, civil disobedience, and armed resistance, caught Israel off guard and drew international attention to the plight of the Palestinians under occupation. The international dimension. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been a persistent feature of the international landscape since the creation of Israel in 1948. The conflict has drawn in regional and global powers, shaping alliances, fueling tensions, and complicating efforts to achieve a peaceful resolution. The United States, as Israel's closest ally, has played a pivotal role in the conflict. U.S. military and economic aid to Israel has been substantial, providing Israel with a significant military advantage over its Arab neighbors. The United States has also used its diplomatic clout to shield Israel from international pressure, often vetoing UN resolutions critical of Israeli policies. The U.S. role in the conflict has been a source of contention, with critics accusing Washington of bias towards Israel and hindering efforts to achieve a just and lasting peace. The Soviet Union, during the Cold War, supported the Arab side of the conflict, providing military aid and diplomatic backing to Arab states opposed to Israel. The Soviet Union saw the conflict as an opportunity to expand its influence in the Middle East and undermine Western interests. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 removed a major player from the conflict, but the legacy of Cold War rivalries continues to shape regional dynamics. The Arab League, a regional organization of Arab states, has been actively involved in the conflict since its inception. The Arab League has sought to mobilize Arab support for the Palestinian cause, imposing boycotts on Israel and providing financial assistance to the PLO. However, the Arab world is not monolithic in its approach to the conflict. The Oslo Accords and beyond. The 1990s witnessed a glimmer of hope with the signing of the Oslo Accords, a series of agreements between Israel and the PLO aimed at achieving a peaceful resolution to the conflict. The accords, brokered by Norway, were a landmark achievement, marking the first time that Israel and the PLO recognized each other and engaged in direct negotiations. The Oslo Accords, signed in 1993 and 1995, were based on the principle of land for peace. Israel agreed to withdraw from parts of the occupied territories, and the PLO recognized Israel's right to exist in peace. The Accords also established the Palestinian Authority, an interim self-governing body for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The Oslo Accords were hailed as a breakthrough, offering a roadmap to a two-state solution with an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. However, the Accords were also met with skepticism and opposition from both sides. Some Israelis viewed the Accords as a betrayal, arguing that they gave too much away to the Palestinians without receiving adequate security guarantees. Some Palestinians viewed the Accords as a sellout, arguing that they did not go far enough in addressing their core demands, such as the right of return for refugees and an end to the occupation. The Oslo Accords, while a significant achievement, ultimately failed to deliver on their promise of a lasting peace. The Accords were plagued by setbacks, including continued violence, the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories, and a lack of trust between the two sides. The assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by a Jewish extremist in 1995 dealt a severe blow to the peace process. The unfinished quest for peace. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a complex and tragic saga that has defied resolution for over 7 decades. It is a conflict rooted in competing claims to the same land, fueled by historical grievances and exacerbated by political ideologies, mistrust, and violence. The quest for peace has been a long and arduous journey, marked by fleeting moments of hope and crushing setbacks. The Oslo Accords, once hailed as a breakthrough, ultimately failed to deliver on their promise of a two-state solution. The continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories, the ongoing blockade of Gaza, and the absence of a meaningful political horizon have fueled despair and radicalization on both sides. The international community, while acknowledging the urgency of the situation, has been unable to bridge the divides and forge a lasting peace. The conflict's human toll is immeasurable. Countless lives have been lost, families torn apart, and futures shattered. The cycle of violence has created a legacy of trauma and mistrust that continues to haunt both Israelis and Palestinians. The conflict's impact extends far beyond the region, fueling tensions in the Middle East and posing a constant threat to global security. The path to peace remains elusive, but the pursuit of a just and lasting solution must continue. A call for understanding and empathy. Understanding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict requires delving into the historical complexities, acknowledging the narratives and grievances of both sides, and recognizing the human cost of this protracted struggle. It demands empathy for the suffering endured by both Israelis and Palestinians who have been caught in a cycle of violence and mistrust for generations. It is easy to resort to simplistic narratives, to demonize one side while absolving the other. However, such approaches only perpetuate the cycle of hatred and violence. A just and lasting peace can only be achieved through dialogue, compromise, and a shared commitment to coexistence. The international community has a moral obligation to support efforts to break the cycle of violence and create the conditions for a just and lasting peace. This includes holding all parties accountable for their actions, upholding international law, and providing humanitarian assistance to those in need. Ultimately, the path to peace lies in recognizing the humanity of the other, in listening to their stories, and in working together to build a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in security, dignity, and peace.